that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over Lunenburg Public Access Channel, and this meeting of the Planning Board is being conducted remotely. The town of Lunenburg, in response to the COVID-19 coronavirus, is currently following the guidance from the Lunenburg Board of Health, Massachusetts Department of Public Health, and the CDC regarding the virus and steps communities can take to prevent the spread. And all town facilities are currently open on a limited basis from 10 to 2, Monday through Thursday, or by appointment only. In accordance with the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, all public meetings are being conducted remotely. The order, which you can find posted on the town website on the COVID-19 Information Center page, accessed through the town manager's webpage, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded and so the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment, as well as public hearings, which will have space for additional public comment. For this meeting, the Planning Board is convening by Zoom video conference as posted on the town's website. Using a smartphone or other internet-enabled device, go to the Zoom application or zoom.us in your browser and enter the meeting ID number or call 888-475-4499. Again, it's 888-475-4499. Tonight's meeting ID number is 828-1981-7484. Again, 828-1981-7484. Please note this meeting is being recorded and broadcast. Some attendees are participating by video conferencing. Please be aware that anything you show on camera will be recorded and will be seen by other people. So sensitive documents, stuff you don't want people to see, please don't show it. Also, please don't try to screen share. The chair will call on individuals who raise their hand using the raise your hand feature, which is now under reactions if you're using the online or the web browser or the Zoom application. If you're on the telephone, I believe it is #9 to raise your hand. Please wait to be addressed by the chair. You will be given the opportunity to speak. With that, I will turn it over to Mr. Cole.
Thank you. Our first appointment this evening is a A&R plan for 111 Mulpus Road. Is the applicant here?
Yes, Stan Dillis from Dillis and Roy here representing the applicant.
Would you like to go ahead and walk us through the plan?
Sure. This is about an 18.5 acre site on Mulpus Road where there was a house that burned down maybe 10 years ago. The existing barn is still there. We're dividing it into 3 conforming lots and a parcel in the rear of about 8 acres that will be conveyed to a conservation entity. There is endangered species habitat in the rear of the property, and we're still working with natural heritage people to finalize the details of exactly who that will be conveyed to. More than likely, it would be conveyed to the town of Lunenburg. It does touch a piece of land that the town of Lunenburg owns in the northeast corner, and we provided an access easement to get to that parcel. And the 3 lots all meet the zoning requirements, and we've already done soil testing and septic designs on these lots. So they're ready to go. There's no other issues. There's no wetlands on the property other than on parcel A. And that's basically it. It's fairly straightforward. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
So you said that it adjoined in the northeast corner, so that's it's not shown on the plan, but that little in the lower right.
There's where 2 lines intersect. The town of Lunenburg has some conservation land over in that corner.
Okay. I guess the challenge with that is access at a corner, but
right. There's really physically there's really no access because they meet at a point.
Yeah. Okay. Do any members of the board have questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Paula.
I don't have any questions. I would just comment that I would hope that the transfer would be made to the town, the Conservation Commission. Obviously, that's your choice, but I would encourage you to investigate that route. I mean, I'm familiar with that parcel, and I think it would provide granted limited access, but I know that there's existing trails on that property, so I think it would be great if it could be conveyed to the town.
Yeah, and that's usually endangered species preference. That way there doesn't need to be a CR on it or anything like that. And that's going to be my suggestion to them, but ultimately I think it'll be up to them. How
Right.
they want to see that disposed of or transferred.
Yep.
Mr. Brenner, do you have any comments?
I have no comments other than to echo what Mrs. Bertram said, and I have no questions on what looked very straightforward to me.
I agree. With that, I'll entertain a motion.
I would make a motion to approve the A&R plan as presented for 111 Mulpus Road.
I would second.
All those in favor by roll call vote, Mrs. Bertram,
Aye.
Mr. Brenner,
Aye.
and I for myself. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next appointment is 360 Flat Hill Road, which was continued from April 12th. Is the applicant here?
Yes, the applicant is here. I'm Alf Berry, representative for Matson Homes.
Okay. If you could go ahead and kind of walk us through the plan. I know at our last meeting, we had a couple of questions that primarily revolved around the wetlands on the property and whether a couple of the lots met the frontage requirement and had viable access.
In terms of your, again, I want to apologize for not meeting at the last meeting. We got our date incorrect. We were sitting around on Tuesday evening instead of Monday waiting. But at any rate, all the lots have the required frontage. And we're working with the Conservation Commission on the wetlands issues, and as I understand it now, that there's some wetlands along Watts Street that are questionable whether they're actually wetlands or not, according to your own town agent. So I can't answer that part of it, but in terms of the areas and frontages, all of these lots conform to your bylaw.
Okay. Mr. Burney, did we get any feedback from the building commissioner?
I did speak with him. He was on
Okay.
vacation last week, so I haven't received anything from him in writing. But his interpretation falls under, you see the zoning bylaws up there. I still don't understand how Zoom works when I'm sharing. So under 255(1) B3, frontage can be reduced by 50% when it provides only access to one dwelling and reduced frontage. Under that A, no more than 2 lots with such reduced frontage can be placed side by side. His interpretation is that it is limited to lots that are created or fall within this specific bylaw. So pre-existing non-conforming lots wouldn't be considered reduced frontage lots because they enjoy a conformity sort of outside of that bylaw because they were existing and they were conforming at the time they were created. So he doesn't feel that lots
If it was lot
doesn't
7
feel-
and 8, is
yeah,
that correct?
7 and 8 would fall into it because wouldn't fall afoul of the 2 reduced frontage lots abutting each other without the benefit of full frontage because the lots owned by, and I don't even want to attempt it, but either of these lots to the east would not fall into that reduced frontage category because they're not created using that section of the bylaw.
May I make a comment? Those are two lots that are already in existence. We're not doing anything with those lots.
Correct.
Those are a separate ownership, separate.
But that doesn't matter per the zoning bylaw. The way that that section reads says that you can only have two reduced frontage lots abutting one another with the benefit of the 100.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I understand.
Full frontage lot.
Yeah.
And the building inspector agrees that because they are pre-existing lots that enjoy non-conforming status, that they don't run afoul of that section of the bylaw.
Okay. Now I understand what you're saying.
From preventing you from having two reduced frontage lots next to each other.
Yeah, that's okay. Now I understand what you're saying. Okay.
The other question that came up at our meeting was the presence of the wetlands and whether or not they impacted accessibility. And did you talk with the building official at all about that?
The building official says he would not consider those to run afoul of zoning. The issue would be with conservation. As Mr. Barry indicated, the wetland consultant that they have been working with has met with the town wetland administrator. They're reviewing the likelihood that these might not be or maybe wetlands. There is a provision within the town's wetland bylaw that would prevent an owner from creating his own hardship. And the Conservation Commission has the option, they're not required to, but they have the option to deny allowing crossing. In speaking with the wetland administrator or the conservation administrator, he felt that the applicant could request a waiver. There's no guarantees that it would be approved. But again, this would run into the thing we talk about regularly with lots of this nature, that they do have frontage, they do have lot size. The wetland crossing that may or may not be granted is not necessarily a reason to deny the plan, but it would create a potential for the applicant to not have buildable lots at these points because of access.
Okay, my question is I understand that whether or not they're allowed crossing is up to conservation. My question is, under an A&R plan, a lot must have meaningful access. We had a situation in which the topography presented a concern to the building official because he thought that it prevented meaningful access. So my question at our last meeting was, if the access to a lot is covered by wetlands, is it still considered meaningful access under the A&R process? That's my question. And you have that definitively from the building official?
I don't have it from the building official because that's not within his purview. The meaningful access is it on a constructed road, which it is. And there's no separation between the two.
Okay, but how then did the previous building official make the determination, and I've read the A&R lot, that and it was a correct lot, that the topography of the lot as it was presented did not provide meaningful access because it was such a steep slope. So it had frontage, but he was concerned that under the current law, it did not provide meaningful access. And I've read many case studies that state that, but I haven't specifically seen conservation wetlands issues as preventing meaningful access.
Wetlands don't prevent meaningful access.
Okay.
There's a case law on that.
Okay, that's my question. Thank you.
Well, getting these clarifications answers the questions I had outstanding about this from last meeting.
Okay. I had one more question. It appears as though we're in receipt of a new plan that was dated today. Is that
We
correct?
did receive a new plan today. That's correct.
Okay. What are the changes that have been made to this plan going back to our last meeting? Because
I
I
would
think,
refer that to the surveyor.
The only changes that were on that plan were to show the trees along Flat Hill Road, which were
Okay.
requested by the board because Flat Hill Road is a scenic road.
okay.
So there's not been any substantive changes to anything other than that.
Okay. Do any members of the board have any other comments?
Mr. Cole, through you, I would note that this project will require a stormwater permit prior to construction, and it will also require a scenic road permit for any driveways that access along Flat Hill that remove trees or puncture the stone wall that is in existence.
Thank you for bringing those 2 points up. That was going to be the next thing I commented on. But I think we've gone through most of it, and as long as the applicant understands that they're moving forward at their own risk in terms of lot 7 and 8 relative to conservation and being able to access those properties, then I would entertain a motion on the A&R.
I would move for us to approve, or whatever the correct term is, for the A&R for Flat Hill Road. I don't have the address in front of me.
360.
360. I do have it in front of me. 360 Flat Hill Road.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call vote. Mrs. Bertram,
Aye.
Mr. Brenner,
Aye.
and I for myself. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you from me, from Ken Matson.
Our next appointment is for 37 Youngs Road, Tri-Town Landing, for a de minimis change. Is someone from Hannigan here?
Bill Hannigan Engineering.
If you could just walk us through what you're looking to change. It looks like we're relocating a fire lane and perhaps doing a gazebo.
Yes. So the sketch that's on the screen now, the original fire location is kind of that honeycomb area. And what we're doing is we're just shifting it towards the building a little bit because there's an existing retaining wall over there that could create some difficulty with the grading. So just want to slide it over. It looks to me about 7 to 10 feet in that range there. Same construction with the supporting materials for the fire truck access, but we just would shift the location closer to the building.
Okay. My first question is, has the fire department seen this update and given us any feedback on it?
Yes, they have. They are in favor of it. They said it actually makes it easier for them because they can get in and they're a little bit closer to the building now.
Okay. I wasn't sure if there was an issue in terms of they need to be so far away in order to put a ladder up or.
No. The fire chief felt that this was a completely reasonable alteration.
Okay. And then in terms of the gazebo, I'm not sure that that's actually really in our purview.
Right. So we just felt it would be good to get it out there that we're building that. It's part of the open space and the green space of the project, but they just felt it was a good idea since we're coming in front of the board anyways, just to basically let them know that we're doing this. That's all. But we felt that the board should at least acknowledge that it's going to be built and go from there. But that was the purpose.
We appreciate that. Any members of the board have any questions regarding this change?
I do not.
I do not.
Well, with that, I will entertain a motion.
I would move we accept the de minimis change for Tri-Town Landing.
Second?
Roll call vote. Mrs. Bertram,
Aye.
Mr. Brenner,
Aye.
and I for myself. Thank you very much. Our next appointment is North End Subaru, but I believe that has been continued.
They have asked for a continuance. Between their zoning board of appeals hearing and the comments received from Mr. Walsh and the Conservation Commission, they're still working out some of the things. So they've asked to be continued till 10 May in order to try and finalize their response and move the process forward a little further.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to continue the North End Subaru hearing to May 10th at 6:35?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote. Mrs. Bertram,
Aye.
Mr. Brenner,
Aye.
and I for myself.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes.
I have a comment regarding the last hearing that we had. I was concerned about the presence of wetlands and whether or not they could be considered under an A&R plan. So I have been reviewing the A&R handbook during this meeting. And in fact, they are something that can be considered. It specifically states a planning board can consider, the court ruled that a planning board could consider topographical issues when reviewing approval not required plans under the Massachusetts Appeals Court decision, and that names the decision. They ruled that a planning board could consider the presence of wetlands, which are subject to the Wetlands Protection Act, when reviewing an approval not required plan. In the future.
Those wetlands are not subject to Wetlands Protection Act. They're only protected by the local bylaw.
Okay.
They're
have
isolated.
Okay. I think we need to have a workshop specifically on A&R plans, because the decision has not yet been made as to whether or not they are designated under the Wetlands Protection Act. You have a comment from the Conservation Commission agent. I don't know whether the Conservation Commission has gone out there, and ultimately they are the authority. So I was just told that it's not a consideration of an A&R plan, when in fact it is. Sorry, Mr.
I
Chair.
agree completely, Mrs. Bertram. And I would say that we should add it to our May 24th agenda.
I would agree.
I'll reach out to Mr. Allison and let him know that we discussed it at our meeting, but A&Rs have become an issue. We keep working on the process, and that's part of it, is being able to determine whether or not there's viable access. So,
And I would ask that we go so far as to get guidance from council on what is and what is a limitation of accessibility for a lot.
okay. I agree with that. Mr. Brenner, do you have any comments?
I do not share Mrs. Bertram's level of concern about the wetlands based on my the wetlands training, rather, the A&R training I went to last year. Where to us, I certainly have no problem with us workshopping this and even asking council for advice. I think that's wise where we have disagreement within the board. Disagreement's even a strong term, where we have concern and varied concerns within the board. But my training specifically, they addressed with us that that needing wetland approval was not sufficient reason for us to deny an A&R, that wetlands only counted when they were of a variety that could that would create illusory access, something like a lake or something being in the way, as opposed to the kinds of wetlands we were discussing in most instances. That said,
But
Go
that's the kind of information I would like to understand, because that differs very greatly from this court case that I'm looking at under the Massachusetts A&R handbook for planning boards. So I think we need to all of us to review the A&R handbook, put together some questions. And Matt, if you could get a copy of the slideshow presentation from the seminar you attended, I think that would be very helpful.
I'll see if I have that handy or if I can email them to get one now. I'll have to go back and find the emails, but I can do that for you.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Excellent. And thank you for doing the research, Mrs. Bertram.
You're welcome.
All right. Our next appointment is a public hearing for 101 Pleasant Street for subdivision approval.
That is correct. Would you like me to read the public hearing notice, or would you like to do it?
If you don't mind.
Lunenburg Planning Board will hold a public hearing on April 26, 2021, 6:35 p.m. via Zoom video conference to hear and review an application under Chapter 325 Subdivision Regulations, excuse me, Article 3, Section 325-3.4 Definitive Plan of the Code of the Town of Lunenburg for a 6-lot subdivision consisting of 6 duplex buildings at 101 Pleasant Street, map 095, parcel 0003, Lunenburg, Mass. Owner applicant is M.A. Pleasant LLC, P.O. Box 903, Ashburnham, Mass. 01430. Materials are available for viewing at the Planning Office, 960 Mass Ave, Lunenburg, MA. And then the rest is the Zoom information which we've covered.
Excellent. Thank you. And is the applicant here this evening?
I'm representing the applicant. I'm Trevor Fletcher from Graz Engineering.
Welcome.
Glad to be here.
If you'd like to go through the plan for us and
Sure, yeah, I'll give a general overview. But first, I'd like to say I haven't received any comments back from the review engineer. I think he's here tonight. He might address some of those later, some of his concerns initially. I haven't seen anything in writing yet. I'm not sure if it got sent to Paul, my boss. He's on vacation. It did?
Sent to Paul this afternoon.
Okay. Yeah, he's on vacation, so I didn't get it. So I don't know what any of the comments say. So I apologize. I can't speak to those. We also attended a Conservation Commission meeting last week, and they had a few concerns that I've kind of addressed a little bit, but mainly they wanted to wait till they saw those comments as well before they made any, serious considerations to the project. So yeah, this is going to be a 6-lot duplex subdivision at 101 Pleasant Street, and it's going to be entirely within the bounds of our residential zoning district. The parcel right now is like 43 acres or so, and we're just going to be dealing with the front 12.4 acres that it's kind of right before the transmission lines there, and it's all within the residential, and the commercial part will be subdivided and joined with some lots over on Massachusetts Avenue. And so yeah, that's the overview of the parcel there. But the lot sizes pretty much are going to average out to be 81,000 square feet. The smallest is 43,000. The largest is going to be 144,000. Although not noted on the plan, the roadway will remain private, and that was a comment that the DPW had about the town's costs and all that stuff. The applicant told me that a homeowners association would be created to care for and maintain the road, snow plowing, and all of that. Each duplex unit is going to be served by an on-site septic system. All those septic systems will comply with Title V. As of right now, I think 4 of the lots are in full compliance. 2 of them need to have additional perk tests done. I designed the septic based on the surrounding area, but the soil conditions were a little too wet to perk when we were out there, so those will have to be addressed prior to the construction of those 2 units. So yeah, the town water will be brought in on site off of Pleasant Street, as well as underground electric throughout the entire subdivision. And all the lots meet lot area, frontage, and upland zoning requirements. As you can see from the plans, there are extensive wetlands throughout the 12.4 acres. It's actually 4.5 acres of wetlands. That's like 1/3 of the subdivided area. The wetlands were delineated originally by, or partially by Whitman and Bingham, and then when we got involved later, additional flags were hung and located by us. All these wetlands have a protective buffer around them, a 30-foot no disturb zone and a 50-foot no impervious zone. And both of these came into play when designing the roadway. The majority of the subdivision, we're utilizing the entire area of the available to us right up to the 30-foot no disturb zone. And this area will be staked out, lined with silt fence, and obviously installed prior to the beginning of any other roadway construction or anything like that to protect the wetlands. One other large element of this project is the wetland crossing right in the beginning. Currently, it exists as just a little wetland with 3 stone wicks running under a existing gravel pathway that heads back towards the power lines. You can see the existing pathway on the first sheet there. And the roadway, the way it's proposed, will begin on an incline and then flatten out right where the proposed culverts are going to be to replace the stone wicks. And that's for 2 reasons: to provide adequate cover per your regulations of those culverts, and to capture as much impervious area within the stormwater system that we possibly could. The area affected by this wetland crossing is going to be just for about 4,100 square feet. And in the conservation meeting, we discussed that they require a 2-to-1 replication ratio. And we had proposed 4,600 square feet of replication just to the north of the crossing. And they want to see 8,200 square feet minimum. So that will be addressed in the second submittal of the plans. And the hydrological analysis we performed was done in the 210 and 100-year storms. The precondition was compared with the postcondition in every scenario. They resulted in a net decrease of peak runoff rate and a slight increase of runoff volume, which over the course of all the wetlands on site, it'll disperse, and it will be minimal increase of standing water in these major storm events because there's just so much wetland for it to spread out on. As for treatment of the stormwater, we kind of have an extensive stormwater treatment system going here. Consists of catch basins, several swales, a downstream defender, sediment forebay, 2 infiltration basins, and a detention basin. And all of these come into play in treating, infiltrating, and detaining the stormwater to achieve these net decreases in runoff. And I believe that's all I have to say. And like I said, my boss is on vacation, but I'll do the best I can to answer any questions. And yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Walsh, if you could go through your review comments. I haven't seen them. They were not in my packet, but I'm sure we got an email list, hopefully.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, this is Jeff Walsh. I'm with Graves Engineering consultant to the planning board. I too was on vacation last week and I wasn't able to get a review done before. And I issued the letter today and I apologize for its lateness. I did CC Paul Grazowitz, understanding I thought he might be back, but nevertheless, Trevor, I apologize for not CCing you.
That's okay.
About 5 minutes ago, I forwarded our review letter to you with another CC to Adam Burney, just to make sure everyone knows who got what. I've got a few, I don't want to go point by point through the letter. It's nobody's had a chance to look at it. I understand. If you did, I thank you for taking the time to do so. But I'd just like to have more of a discussion as I walk down through some of the more important comments, or what I felt was more important to raise my concern or point things out to the board. First, with respect to zoning, I agree, lot frontage area, so forth. We don't have an issue with those. But there is a requirement in the zoning bylaw for duplex dwellings that the parking areas in the maneuvering areas, not technically the driveway, but I looked at it as you have to have a driveway within the front yard setback, but the rest of the parking areas are required to have a 25-foot setback. And it's a little confusing in the zoning bylaw, the way it's worded, whether it's measured from the street or from the front property line or the side of the right-of-way, side of right-of-way being the same as the front property line. But my interpretation, after looking at it 2 or 3 times, is that all the discussion in the zoning bylaw doesn't speak to physical features like the edge of a street. They speak to property lines. So my conclusion, in my opinion, is that the measurements need to come from the front property line. And so there's 2 or 3 lots that part of the parking area might encroach up to, I don't know, roughly 5 feet into this 25-foot buffer area, if you will, for parking. Those are lots number 2, 5, and 6. I've also recommended that you may want to confirm my interpretation with the zoning enforcement officer. That's my one zoning bylaw comment. With respect to subdivision rules and regulations, I'd like to point out a few things. One street light is proposed at the project entrance, and I defer to the planning board of the town of Lunenburg as a whole. In other communities, sometimes the board of selectmen will weigh in on how many street lights should be provided. But I defer whether the one street light is sufficient or whether there should be one or more other street lights within the subdivision. There's a couple of horizontal curves which are potential areas for a street light, and the other area might be the cul-de-sac. Moving on, and we're going to need to see drainage calculations for sizing of the drainage pipes. Yes, a pre and post development hydrology was run, but to get into the minutia of each and every pipe, that usually comes by way of what's called rational method pipe sizing calculations. Next, I'd like to speak to site distance for driver exiting the site. For driver exiting the site, looking left, I didn't see any issues. Pleasant Street has a fairly continuous grade up, looking left, and is straight horizontally, and there were no visual impediments. However, looking right, there were visual impediments within the woods themselves, and a little past the site property, there is a horizontal curve to the right. And I put myself in the position of a driver's eye, but I was having troubles. Right now I could see pretty good because there's no leaves on the trees, but the low growing saplings and brush when they leaf out will be problematic. And there were some other trees that I'm not calling for clear cutting, but in addition to removing saplings and brush, there may be a few selective larger diameter trees up. These are trees up to 12-inch diameter roughly that might need to be removed so the trunks do not inhibit sight distance. So I think that's something that the design team should be addressing as well. Next item is vertical curbing is required at the entrance radii. And it's hard to see it on this plan, but the curb line, thank you, whoever's got the mouse. The curb line, if we could zoom in down to the, yep, no, you're trying to scroll to the abutter's driveway at the project entrance. Thank you. There we go. If we could just, they're perfect, perfect. Yeah, that's the abutter's driveway. And the curb radius does in fact go in front of the abutters frontage, which is something that's frowned upon. And furthermore, if there's going to be curb there, the curb's obviously going to block the abutters' access to the driveway, which can't happen. And in my opinion, the road should be shifted away from the abutters' left lot line looking from the street, sufficient so that there is no curbing in front of the abutters' driveway. And to that point, there is a waiver request to not have a rounding of a property line, and that's because the applicant does not control that abutting property. But nevertheless, the intention, according to the subdivision rules and regs, is for that property line rounding to allow for a curb radius. And the curb radius is provided, but again, the problem here is that it encroaches in front of the abutter's driveway. So to summarize, granite curbing is required, but more importantly, I feel that the subdivision street is too close to the abutter's driveway as is currently proposed. And the driveway should be moved farther away from the abutter's driveway unless an agreement is reached between the applicant and the abutter whereby once the subdivision street is constructed, the abutter has the ability to gain access to a public way from the new street and eliminate the Pleasant Street access. That's something that's not uncommon in a situation like this. I've seen it done more than once, but I don't feel that anyone can force the abutter to take part in that if they choose not to. All right. Next concern I have is with respect to retaining walls in the right-of-way. This plan sheet does not show it, but there are 2 retaining walls proposed in the right-of-way for a distance of roughly 200 feet. Thank you, there they are. They're in the middle of the shoulder on each side of the street. Thank you. The cursor showing one and the other. Now, in my opinion, my recommendation to communities is that a right-of-way is for a number of purposes. Obviously, the very first purpose is to provide access to lots, but secondly, to provide utilities. And some of those utilities are located in shoulders. And in my opinion, I recommend that the retaining walls be outside the right-of-way so that the town has the ability to use the shoulder as it's intended, either now or in the future. In some situations, there aren't all the full set of utilities proposed now, but who's to say 25, 50 years from now, sewer doesn't come through, gas doesn't come through, or something else comes through where that utility normally goes in the shoulder. And also it's good for, snow storage, and just basically it's one less impediment for the municipality if there's not a retaining wall within the right-of-way that to own and maintain. Got a few more, appreciate you bearing with me. Drainage pipes at catch basins need to have 3 feet of cover unless approved otherwise by the planning board. The pipes near the entrance, yep, right in there, the pipes from the 2 catch basins will have about 2.3 feet of cover, which is less than desired, less than what the subdivision rules and regs call for. In the case, they're proposing high-density polyethylene pipe, which is a plastic pipe. If adequately bedded, that just makes the required cover of about 1.5 to 2 feet, which should be all right. And if it were reinforced concrete pipe, the recommendation would have been to go to class 5. Usually you use class 3 or class 4. Class 5 has more reinforcing wire, so it's able to withstand shallower cover and higher, less distributed loads, if you will, from the soil cover. But again, the reason I bring this to your attention, it's 3 feet of cover unless approved by the planning board. So that's why I'm bringing it to the planning board's attention. Moving on, the next comment is the new stormwater management regulations that went into effect at the town meeting in the fall. This is the second project I've been involved with, which falls, what I feel falls under the jurisdiction. The jurisdiction is any disturbance of an acre or greater. This obviously will have greater than an acre of disturbance. There are specific requirements in these local stormwater regulations, and some of them are following the MS4 requirements that are being put onto the cities and towns, and originating with the federal, at the federal level. Nevertheless, I did not review for compliance with these regulations yet because the project clearly does not comply yet. For example, rainfall data needs to come from what's called the Northeast Regional Climate, NRCC. Nevertheless, it's referred to as the Cornell method rainfall data, which was not utilized. There's more stringent TSS removal requirements than what's required by Mass DEP, and there's a removal requirement for total phosphorus. All these design engineers going forward will have to address in their stormwater reports. So I didn't want to waste any time going through and calling out each and every individual one, but nevertheless, the regulations I understand are now available, and they supersede what had been on the town's website. Now I'm going to get into the stormwater hydrology and stormwater management. We reviewed the pre and post development hydrology to the extent we could. We did not have the pre and post development drainage maps. We'll need a set of those. With respect to impervious area, the hydrology calculations appear to be in order. We looked at the amount of impervious area for the road. The difference in increase impervious area is attributed to the lots for the buildings, for the parking areas and so forth. And we'll want to get into further detail once we see those pre and post development watershed maps, but nevertheless, it seems that a reasonable allotment has been made for development on the lots. Moving on, with respect to catch basins, the set of catch basins nearest the entrance and the set of catch basins about 250 in are configured where there's one set and there's the other set, where the pipes go from one catch basin to the other. Mass DEP what requires now that they be in a catch basin to manhole configuration, and that's so that not too much flow is going through any one catch basin where it fails to serve as a primary settling device. Moving on to the next, infiltration basin A. The stormwater system consists of one detention basin, which is nearest the entrance, right about where the cursor was. Yep, that's the detention basin. And then farther into the site, there's 2 other basins, but those serve as infiltration basins. The one labeled basin A, there will need to be some soil testing done at the basin to demonstrate there's a 2-foot offset to groundwater. Basin A is the one farther to the right, the one that looks longer and skinnier. Thank you. That's in an area where I understand there was sands and gravels found nearby for the septic system, and seems to be a decent area for an infiltration basin, but nevertheless, the soil testing will need to be done. And then over at the middle infiltration basin, thank you, that one there. Based on my read of the existing topography and depth, the estimated seasonal high groundwater, that infiltration basin will be about a 1/2 foot into seasonal high groundwater, whereas a 2-foot offset to groundwater is required. Those are, if anyone's following along, those are comments down around number 22, up 22 and 23. The next three comments, 24, 25, and 26, have to do with access for maintenance purposes to the stormwater basins and around the stormwater basins. The top of the berms will serve as access points. So those berms need to be at least 10 feet wide for access equipment. Currently, they're proposed as 4 feet wide. There needs to be at the basin to the right, basin A. Thank you. There'll need to be a 10-foot wide access that doesn't cross the swale so that maintenance equipment can get there without having to drive in and through the swale. And lastly, the easements will need to be wide enough so that if a piece of maintenance equipment is maneuvering around the basins, they stay within the easement. In other words, they don't want to be two tires down on the side slope going into the basin to stay within the easement. The easements are up to 2 to 4 feet wide, provide only up to 2 to 4 foot of space in a couple of situations. So the easements need to be widened as adjustments are made for the access. Almost done, folks. Last on stormwater management is for impoundments such as these, we look for 1 foot of freeboard as measured from the peak 100-year water surface to the top of the berm. And that's to allow for a little bit of settling if that occurs on the berm. If there's a little bit of settlement over time after construction. And not that these are big basins, but on much bigger basins, you get worried a little bit about wave action, but that's not the case here. Nevertheless, we're looking at just a few tenths of a foot, and in one case, a breach. So the design team needs to look at freeboard so that water stays contained within these basins. And if it flows out, it only flows out through the primary outlets or through the emergency spillways, which would be designed for that purpose. And we don't want to run the risk of overtopping a berm and breaching a berm by causing some erosion on the soil surface. And lastly, if we could go back to zoom in of the abutter's driveway. Thank you. Just to the, if you're looking from the street, just to the back of the driveway, there's a small slope. It's either on the abutter's property or it extends into the applicant's property. No, it's actually, we're getting warm. Right at the back of the driveway, between the driveway and the wetland. Thank you. Right about where your cursor is now. There's a small, I don't want to call it a hill, but there's a slope that's somewhere around 3 to 4 foot high. That's not reflected on the topography on this plan. And I'm concerned with how the elevations of the road and shoulders will tie into that hill because that rises up pretty quickly from that abutter's driveway. Again, order of magnitude about 3 to 4 feet, I believe. Those are the highlights of my letter. I don't want to really, I can get into more detail if you like, but I'd like to stop there because those are the things I really wanted to call to the planning board's attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Concise as usual. Do any members of the board have questions or comments?
I do, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Mrs. Bertram.
There are a number of concerns that Graves just outlined, as well that Jeff just outlined, as well as some concerns relative to the road grading from the DPW director. I did take a look at the stormwater analysis report that was sent to us. It's different in a normal what I'm used to seeing in a stormwater report. So I'm looking forward to that review from Jeff. Additionally, I had a question for Adam on the homeowners component. One of the biggest concerns the DPW director seems to have is the amount of maintenance that's going to be needed for these stormwater structures. And typically, In an operation and maintenance plan, it specifies how the homeowner association will be set up, who will be responsible, and that is lacking. So I would want to see that revised. Additionally, I've heard mention of waivers, but in my packet, I didn't have any waiver requests, and I don't know if we have a formal waiver request.
So I'm going to take them backwards. The way that the rules and regulations read, the waiver request should be made in writing, outlining what the public benefit is to the planning board waiving the requirements that are requested to be waived. I don't believe there is any letter in there requesting a waiver. The waivers are listed on the title page of the plan in the bottom right corner. So again, I don't know that they would necessarily be considered formal requests. It's waiving sidewalks, the intersection radius, and the maximum length of a dead-end road extending from 650 to, I believe it's right around 850.
Okay. Let me just, Adam, if I can just say, I would want to have a written waiver request.
Yes.
You stated the reasons that the board should consider granting those waivers.
Mm-hmm. So the waiver is right here,
Thank you.
as it was submitted. And then your question about the homeowners association and the O&M plan. So generally, the way that I've always interpreted O&M plans is it's the manual for how the system should be maintained. So it says the downstream defender needs to be cleaned X number of times per year, or when sediment is at this. Here's how you clean it. Here's the mowing schedule and inspection schedule for the basin. And it may assign an individual entity to do that, or it may say the entity is responsible. Since the owner has, or the applicant has indicated they intend to keep the site private, I don't think that there's anything wrong with having them write the O&M plan listing the homeowners association. And I think that with that request, it's well within the board's purview to ask for the documents that would create and outline the manner in which the association is created, how it's managed, all of those things as part of the approval, because if it's approved and the applicant is pledging this, then the planning board ensuring that those documents reflect accurately the roles and responsibilities that would be put out and have that reviewed by council would be, I believe, appropriate. So I think that there's a lot of different bits in there. I did have a chance to read Jeff's letter this afternoon, and he did make a number of comments on the O&M plan, what was included in it, and what also needs to be adjusted and included in it. So I think there's some work to do there. And hopefully, with Mr. Fletcher here, he's hearing what you're saying, and he'll be able to include some of those items in the updated O&M plan.
Okay, and you answered my next question perfectly, which was that do we get an opportunity to review the documents relative to the homeowners association? Because I would want to ensure how that was set up and how it would be funded, et cetera. Because it's if the stormwater system is going to be maintained by an association, I think it's important that we have that information. So you answered that perfectly. So thank you.
Mr. Chair, there is a hand from the public if the board is.
Certainly. Please go ahead. I can't see the hand, so.
Oh, it's Mr. Bittner.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Bittner.
Hello all. How are you? Greg Bittner, 32 Sandy Cove Road, formerly of 129 Pleasant Street. So I just wanted to make sure that it's more than a 10-unit complex, so there'll be an affordable housing component to this.
That would be required
Can
by
you hear me?
bylaws. Yep.
Yes, Greg. Yes, we can.
Okay. And then it doesn't show, there's a lot of other features that go along with the property. The pond is owned by the other abutter, Mr. Proctor. So I just wanted to make sure that none of the runoff would go into that pond because it may affect another abutter's property as well because it's a shared property line with the pond. And then not to attack anyone's character, but I'm familiar with the applicant and the history of this property. There has been many instances with the town that they have had troubles with this person, litigation, things of that nature, and it's all public record. That was all through the Conservation Commission, but I just request that the board inform themselves of that. I'm utmost confidence you'll make the right decisions, but I'd just like to make sure all the i's are dotted and t's are crossed. And if there's any need to secure bonds or any ability to secure bonds, I would encourage you to do that. That's my comment for now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that actually brings up one of the questions that I had in terms of a bond. I know in the past we've had situations where subdivisions like this have been done and they've been held privately, but then the homeowners association has come back to us to seek remediation for roadway issues and so on. So it's just something I'd like to bring up and make sure it's on our radar so we can be proactive and hopefully avoid issues going forward. Mr. Brenner, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Only on the smaller side, what was the minimum lot size for this development?
I believe the smallest lot on the lot is 43,000 square feet.
Is that going to, I don't know how the order of operations works, but I know we used to, for duplexes, require an additional 50%, and we have them, and we have the request before town meeting to bring that back again. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So I don't know how the order of operations works, where this is submitted now and the law may be changing, but we may be approving later. So I don't know how that works, but I wanted to put that on our radar because I thought I heard the 40,000 number.
I can answer that, and I'll actually speak. I'll go back to Mr. Cole's comment about the bond. It's a subdivision, will require a method of surety, whether it's covenant or some form of financial security for all of the roadway and utility work to be done. As they complete it and as it's inspected, that would be released. Most individuals will sign a covenant to begin with, which binds all the lots from gaining building permits in order to allow them to do the majority of the base work, bringing any water and or sewer that might be there, electric and cable in, laying down the binder course of the road, and all the sub-base. And then they would come and they would give the town an estimate based on, Mass Highway weighted bid prices for the remainder of the work. The town would accept that with a contingency for inflation over time that would be put into a third-party account, and it would serve for the purposes that you spoke about. As far as the order of operations, I had similar questions because when you file a subdivision, there is an 8-year freeze on the zoning in place at the time that it is filed. This was filed, I believe, after the first advertisement of the town meeting warrant article, but in discussions with town council, that freeze is not subject to, so when you file town meeting warrant, you have a public hearing and you advertise, folks can be, if they don't have a permit in hand, can be held to the proposed zoning amendment back to the date of the first advertisement. That is not the case with subdivision filings because of some nuance in 40A, and I can get a more detailed explanation to sort of take the time to get that answer prior to moving too far ahead, because I didn't want this to get in front of the board and have it move along and then find out that the applicant was back into single family home, and that wasn't gonna that was going to cause a bigger problem. So if you'd like a more legal explanation, I can get the lowdown on that.
I would.
Okay. But Adam, do I understand correctly that what you're saying is that this development would not likely be held, would not be held to
It would
the,
not be held to the 1.5.
that's a thing, I guess. All right.
The other question that I have is, Adam, can you speak specifically to the affordable component that Mr. Bittner brought up?
I can. So in the zoning bylaw, once you crest, I believe it's 9 or more units, you're required to provide 10% or at 10% of the units as affordable. So this, because it is 12, it would be 2 affordable units because you can't provide a 20th of a unit. So those would need to fit the 80% of moderate low mod income, the low mod income standards as outlined under 40B. So it wouldn't be a 40B development, but the units would have to be reserved to be sold or rented under the income standards outlined for low mod.
Okay, I just want to make sure, Mr. Fletcher, that you're aware of that and can bring that back to the property owner.
I made note of it, and I'll discuss it with the applicant and Paul when he gets back from vacation, and we'll address that.
So
Thank you.
I can actually give you the site on that.
Any other comments or questions from the board?
I would just ask, obviously, there's a number of review comments as well as changes that are going to be made to the plan. I would ask the representative how long we're obviously going to continue this. When would you expect us to continue it, to 2 weeks or 4 weeks?
My boss coming back from vacation on Thursday, which really only gives us about a week to perform the revisions. I guess we could just do 2 weeks for now, and then if we need to, we'll just continue it if we're not prepared at the next meeting.
And we do require information to be submitted the Tuesday before the meeting in order.
Oh, you do? Okay, then it probably will be 4 weeks then.
So it would be the 24th, Adam, is that right?
That's correct. That would be the 1 month meeting.
Okay. So I would make a motion, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, I think we have some other public comments.
So, sorry, go ahead.
That's all right. We have 2 hands raised. I'll take Paul's
We actually have 3.
first. Oh, 3. Okay.
So you said Paul's iPad?
Yep.
Hi, we're at 182 Mass Ave. I just wanted to agree with Mr. Bittner and his comment regarding the applicant's negative character that we well so know, and also remind the board of how he illegally built a bridge in the woods when he first started developing this land.
Thank you. Mr. Bittner? Go ahead.
Can I defer to Miss Adams since she's had her hand raised longer? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Go ahead, Andrea.
Hello, everyone. I'm sorry if you can't hear me, but I'm battling one heck of a head cold. Sorry. In any case, I wanted to tell you what I told the Conservation Commission, which is I'm working with some people I know to develop comments on the project that will include, hopefully, comments on the roadway and other features about the project. I'm representing my mother who lives at 39 Pleasant Street. I would say, in my opinion, it's one of the most aggressive development proposals I've ever seen on a project that is significantly encumbered by wetlands issues. So I hope to have that in time for the Conservation Commission meeting, which was continued to their, I think, May 5th meeting date. If not, I will certainly hope to have it ready for the planning board's next meeting on this. And I guess all I would say is anything you can do, particularly since it's a private road maintenance, to prevent the town from having to take over that maintenance would certainly behoove you. And I'm also familiar with the requirements for affordable housing. I guess my question would be, and perhaps the applicant doesn't know at this stage, whether the ownership model is ownership, meaning homes are sold, or whether it's condo or rental, in terms of the ownership model for the units, as that will affect the price of the affordable units, because the income levels are different for each type of those sorts of ownerships, or you have to take into other factors such as an affordable lottery and other things that can influence the completion of those units. So thank you very much for your time. And again, my apologies for sounding like I'm at the bottom of a bucket.
Any other comments from the public?
I'll just address one of the things she said. I think she said that it was continued to the 5th at conservation. We actually made that the 19th to get more time to review. I just wanted to clear up any confusion, just so if anybody wants to attend the conservation commission, they don't go to the wrong one. It's on the 19th, not the 5th.
Thank you.
Yep.
I raised my hand. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I
had another comment. I was just deferring to Andrea. So before I ask my other question, I apologize for not raising my hand sooner. So again, I just want, go ahead.
Go ahead, Greg.
You good? Yep. So again, there's the road cut moratorium that may need to be taken into consideration. And when Mr. Walsh was speaking of the direct abutter 127 Pleasant Street, Halberdell, and that the curve had to somehow get into her property. I mean, do you even allow a proposal where they don't have permission to use someone else's property for their project? And what kind of documentation or agreement would be needed for that abutter?
Well, that's certainly something we've got to work out.
I was just wondering, does it actually go into her property through Jeff's comments?
Based on the plan I'm looking at, it does look like it cuts over the corner of her lot, but
okay.
Trevor.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Bittner, no, the road is not proposed to be on the abutter's property, but the road is proposed to be in the Pleasant Street right of way in front of the abutter's property. And that's, it's just something's frowned upon at a minimum.
Okay.
The front,
so it's not, there's nothing that needs to be done infringing on the rights of that property owner as far as their property.
Well, they're not infringing on the abutter's property, but they are infringing upon the abutter's driveway, a portion of which is within the right of way, the Pleasant Street right of way.
Okay, so they'd be basically sharing that portion of her driveway and the right of way for both, for the driveway and the road entrance?
The pavement overlaps a little bit. It's hard to see, but just to the left of that crosshair is where the dashed line, which represents the edge of the road, crosses over the driveway, which is right there. Yep. That's the edge of the driveway, that line.
So my basic question is there any kind of agreement needed from, or permission needed from that abutter to accomplish what's proposed as of now? Or is it more of a technical issue?
Both myself and the DPW director have opined that the road should be moved farther away from that driveway.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I just want to make sure that none of that property is infringed on without that person knowing. So.
Well, and that is one of the waivers that they're requesting. At least that's what's listed on the plan.
Okay.
Well, they're requesting
I'm gonna-
property line radius.
Yeah. All right.
Here-
I'm going to reach
here
out
it's
to
a-
Adam and request all the documentation. I haven't had a chance to get the plans yet, so I'll, and I know it's going to be continued, so I don't want to take up too much time tonight because I know how long these meetings run. So, but that's all of my questions for now. I appreciate your listening to me.
Thank you. And so Adam, they're requesting the property line radius?
Yeah,
not-
so you see
Okay.
how it's a 90-degree property line here? And if you go up here, they're showing the roadway with a radius here. So this is what we spoke to the representative of the potential developer on Highland Street about at the last meeting. They did not have the full 100 feet to be able to get the 50 feet of road layout and the 25-foot radius on both sides. And this property runs into that same issue. So it appears that here they have the 25-foot radius. Here they're looking to just have a 90-degree intersection of the right-of-way and their right-of-way and the town's right-of-way. And that would be this intersection right here. Whereas
Okay.
it's that nice gentle curve. So that if in the future Pleasant Street were to be widened and sidewalks were installed, it would allow for a reasonable curve to bring the sidewalk in, and it would be nice and gentle, whereas here it could get a little more complicated.
Okay.
And if I may, I'm not familiar with the other project that Adam just referenced, but here there is more than 100 feet of frontage. The frontage extends up the page as we're looking at it,
Yes.
some distance. So there is the ability to move the proposed right-of-way and the proposed road up the sheet a little bit. To eliminate the- Yep.
I think there may be some
a little bit.
natural
The reason
features
we
that prevent
did it
that.
the way we did it was to limit the amount of wetlands disturbance. As you go north, you can see the wetlands actually get much wider. So we're trying to limit on a conservation standpoint, limit the amount of disturbance we had. And that's similar to what we were thinking about with the retaining walls on each side of the wetland replication or the wetland disturbance, is having those retaining walls there will limit the wetland disturbance, pleasing conservation a little bit. So that was the thought of that when we were originally designing it.
Okay. I'd like to see if we could address the two largest issues as I see it. One is the ownership of the roadway. I know as it's planned right now, this is intended to be maintained privately. And that obviously addresses many of the concerns that the town and the DPW would have in terms of ongoing maintenance. But I don't know that that's necessarily something we can condition or guarantee moving forward. So I'd like to get to the bottom of that issue. And then secondly, I think it would be helpful if we could go through the waivers, even though we don't have a written submission, and just kind of get a feel for if those waivers are going to be approved or not, so we avoid further conversations at our next hearing. So I guess my first question to Adam would be, can we ensure that this project stays in private ownership through our subdivision approval process?
Yes and no. You could not, by your own choice, add a condition that this road will never be accepted by town meeting. And that's because the owner always has you can't dictate what town meeting will or won't do.
Exactly. Okay.
You can, and the board has done this in other places where there are conditions that, and I think some of the solar fields we've dealt with were examples of this, where the board wanted to add a condition regarding the pilot agreement with the Board of Select, or the Select Board. And in discussions with town council and looking at it, the advice was, could not do this on your own. The applicant had volunteered that they would be working with the select board to instill a pilot agreement and was willing to do so. So memorializing that in a condition that was worded in the correct way allowed it to be included. And since the applicant was in agreement, they were not going to be availing themselves of their appeal process. And I would imagine that something similar could be done here. I don't know what the end result would be in 20 or 50 or 100 years, when the property owners decided they were sick of doing it and they wanted to petition town meeting to accept the road. But I also imagine that 100 years ago, people who were building roads and creating lots couldn't imagine anything that we would be doing today. So I can, again, run this through council just to verify that the situation is similar. And I think that with the creation of the homeowners association and the assignments of duties such as road maintenance and stormwater maintenance, you start to move in a direction that those things are much less likely that they would be approaching the town for taking over ownership.
Okay. Well, it would certainly be helpful to get town council to weigh in on our ability to condition this, because, you know, we've got several projects in town that have caused issues, whether it was lack of maintenance or ongoing responsibilities being handed over to the DPW, which they have limited resources to do the maintenance on these newer infiltration and detention areas. So if we could get to the bottom of that, I think that would be helpful. And then the second issue being the waivers. My personal opinion is that I am not in favor of waivers in general for new developments. You know, I feel like we have a set of bylaws and regulations for a reason, and they've been carefully developed to create good outcomes. And I'd just like to get the input of the board so that we can relay that along and the applicant can plan accordingly.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mrs. Bertram.
I would echo that sentiment, that I am resistant to granting waivers, especially for new development, unless there's a very compelling reason. As you said, I think our bylaw is well crafted, and it was crafted that way for a reason. I would also suggest, I was going to make the same suggestion as you just did, that we get, and Adam did, that we get an input from town council. I would like that input to be in writing. And I also would question, if we do not have the ability to require a homeowners association, do we have the ability to ask the applicant to change the design, as we do not have the resources to maintain the proposed design? So for example, the proprietary BMP unit, if we do not have the capability to maintain that, do we have the ability to not approve it and to request another stormwater BMP instead?
I would believe that you do.
So if we could just get confirmation of that, I would hope that you're right, Mr. Burney, because, you know, the DPW director is pretty vehement that they do not have the resources to maintain the structures that are proposed.
And
Okay.
Sorry,
Go ahead,
Mrs.
Mr.
Bertram.
Brenner.
Okay. I would, in terms of waivers, I think we send a clear message, because I'm in the exact same position as you and Mrs. Bertram in terms of I am highly disinclined to approve waivers unless there is a very compelling reason, for the same reasons that you've both given already. And I don't, in terms of looking at the potential for this, saying that there's a homeowners association, so that would prevent the property from being handed over to the town. I don't know where this legally falls in terms of what we can and can't and should and shouldn't consider. So I would absolutely take feedback on that. But I find reliance on homeowners associations troubling, especially in a small development like this, because, okay, you're looking at 12 families. There's a very good chance in 12 families that none of them are going to be interested in dealing with leading a homeowners association and taking care of the issues, in which case work could fall through the cracks and not get done, and then we have a problem with systems that aren't being maintained. We see this in much larger condo developments. We see this in smaller as well, where there isn't that public, people buy in assuming someone else will do the work, then no one does the work within their little unit. So I don't know what we can and can't consider there. I don't know what is and isn't relevant historically, but that's just a concern I have about having systems that have to be maintained by a homeowners association.
I agree with you. Homeowners associations aren't a great solution. They don't guarantee, but the creation of the homeowners association indicates that the applicant and developer is intending for self-maintenance of the facilities. So, like I said, there isn't a good way to say the town won't accept the road, other than everyone showing up to town meeting and voting against it. That's really the one way that you can guarantee. And even then, it's an up and down vote.
I guess I'm also concerned about having a bunch of a stormwater system that needs a lot of active maintenance, because so then the town doesn't take it over, whether it's brought forward or not. Let's say no one even brings it to the town, then you just have a system that isn't being maintained. I don't know what procedures and safeguards are in place to force its maintenance, but that's just a concern of mine. Again, I don't know how much we can address that within this process, but if we can't address it in the process, I would like to.
Okay. Anything else we want to touch upon? Mr. Fletcher, do you have any questions for us, comments?
I guess just in mind of the fact that you guys aren't really in favor of waivers, should I be under the assumption that I should proceed with redesigning the whole subdivision, not using or limiting the roadway to 650 feet in length? I guess it's because I don't want to start revising the plan if I have to shorten it by 200 feet. That's going to change it quite a bit. So I don't know if we could address that a little bit more so it's defined in any real sense, I guess.
Well, I guess from my perspective, we don't have a full board night. We have 3 out of 5 members. But it seems as though the consensus is that the waivers are not something that we would approve unless there was a very compelling reason. So at that point, it is up to you to proceed as you feel necessary. If you would like to move forward and continue with the plan that you have, that's certainly within your rights. Just realize that if the waivers aren't granted, if they are denied, then you would need to go back and redesign.
Yeah. And then the only other thing was in regards to one of Jeff Walsh's comments about the 25-foot setback measure from the street or the property. I don't know if we had any further discussion of that, but it'd be something that I'd have to address. And I think I need some input from you guys, whether you guys enforce that parking area 25 feet from the street line, or if it was from the property line.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I can address both of those questions. and one with a potential solution and the other with an answer. For the parking, we'll seek input from the building commissioner.
Okay.
Get you something from him in writing.
Perfect.
As far as the waivers, it may be in the best interest of the board and the applicant to continue this for 2 weeks, have the applicant resubmit their compelling reasons for said waivers, have the board reconvene on May 10th to address specifically those portions of the application. If the board feels that the reasons aren't compelling, at that point, they could take a vote on the waivers, memorialize it as part of the public hearing, and that would let the applicant know whether or not they needed to remove 200 feet from the road, redesign the subdivision, or whether there are items that the board feels they have met the compelling standard and are willing to move forward with.
Okay, that sounds like a very good idea to me. Any thoughts on those ideas from Mrs. Bertram or Mr. Brenner?
Sounds like a good idea to me too.
That sounds like a good idea to me. I do want to clarify my position somewhat and say that I am open to hearing compelling reasons, but I don't want to create the any illusion that my default response is yes. My default response is no, but I do want to hear a reason why I would change it.
Okay. So we'll write up the reasons, a full length waiver request form, and we'll hear that in 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks after that, we'll go through and either redesign the whole thing based on your responses to the waivers and go from there.
Sounds good.
All right. Perfect.
Okay, so
Anything else?
I don't see any additional hands raised.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to continue this hearing to May 10th at 6:05.
I would second that.
Okay. All those in favor by roll call vote, Mrs. Bertram,
Aye.
Mr. Brenner,
Aye.
and I for myself. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
And Andrea, if you're still here, I hope you feel better.
All right. The next item on our agenda is Bright Farms Phase 1 Land Development Plan.
So, excuse me. We heard the request that Bright Farms had to alter the plan that they had submitted. I indicated that it had been sent to Mr. Walsh for review. Mr. Walsh has submitted his review back, and there are some significant concerns outlined in there. And so I would make the recommendation to the board that this be a site plan modification as opposed to a de minimis change based on the amount of comments and the removal of buffering and elevation to the east of the project specifically, because I believe that's something the board will want to address as part of any alteration to the plan. Bright Farms is aware that this is on the agenda, but there was no indication that it would be discussed in any substantial way. They have received the comments. I expect their civil team is working on addressing those, but I think overall, based on those comments and the level that they are altering the project, it would be best to require a full amendment.
Does that need to be an official motion, or do you just notify them?
I can just notify them. I mean, if you'd like to make a motion, and certainly the board is welcome to disagree with me. Perhaps if they were to satisfy the matters outlined by Mr. Walsh, the board would feel okay giving them a de minimis change. But that's the board's decision, not mine.
No, I certainly agree with the way you've summarized things, Mr. Burney, and in reviewing Graves' review letter, there's clearly a lot going on here, and so I think a formal amendment to the plan makes sense.
I agree.
And so,
I will go ahead and notify them. It'll probably be the end of May.
okay. All right. Moving on to minutes approval for April 12th. Everybody
Night,
have it.
everybody. Thank you.
Night, Jeff.
Jeff, thank you.
Night.
Good night, Jeff.
Minutes approval. Did everybody have an opportunity to review the minutes for April 12th?
Yes, sir.
Oh, entertain a motion.
I would move to approve the minutes for April 12th for the planning board meeting and for the public hearing on the town warrant articles.
Second.
All those in favor, roll call vote. Mrs. Bertram,
Aye.
Mr. Brenner,
Aye.
and I for myself. Excellent. Committee reports. Stormwater Task Force. That's Matt, I believe.
Yeah, we were supposed to meet last Thursday. The meeting was canceled due to the meeting being booked at the same time in the same Zoom account as finance. So due to the proximity to town meeting, finance took precedent.
Okay. And Mr. Allison also takes care of AdCom and TCP BDC. So open space, Mrs. Bertram.
We did not meet. We're not meeting again until May.
Okay. Capital planning.
And not met since our last meeting.
And the Economic Development Committee.
Not met since our last meeting.
Well, we're moving right along. MRPC and MJTC.
MRPC has not met since our last meeting. We'll be meeting next Thursday, the 6th. MJTC did meet. Largely, again, nothing that really directly applies to Lunenburg. Things that residents may or may not find interesting is at the intersection in Fitchburg of Route Route 12, 31, and 2A. They actually, several students from WPI did a traffic analysis and made some recommendations at that intersection, which is particularly hairy. And I know the Fitchburg DPW said they were going to take their some of their recommendations under advisement to try to make the intersection both short and long term a little safer. I bring that up because it is frequented by people, anyone passing through in that direction through Fitchburg. Also, something people may find of note is the rail trail between Fitchburg and Leominster is looking at some delays and is being moved on the tip. The exact nature of when it will be moved to is not yet determined, and the MJTC voted to not make a recommendation about it because there's just a lot of information that's up in the air. They have to put a pause on it while getting info from the MBTA and other groups that the initial plan isn't going to work quite as proposed. So there's a delay on the rail trail, but it's not stopped by any means, just they need to solve some issues.
Can I ask a question on the MJTC?
Yes.
They had stopped meeting for a while, and I'm just wondering if they're meeting again. Do you know?
That was the MJTC.
Okay, I'm sorry, the Trails Coalition. Do you know if they're meeting again on the rail trail, or do you know who's handling that?
I do not have any information about that now.
Okay, thank you.
No, sorry.
No worries.
Okay. Moving on to our workshop for subdivision regs and procedure for submitting plans.
And I'm just looking for any input back from the board on what was submitted out to them a month or two ago on the submission standards for definitive plans.
I don't have anything for you. Does anybody else wish to comment?
I don't have anything either.
I didn't review it before this meeting and I don't have it handy, so I don't have my notes. I apologize, Adam.
No worries. If you want to send me it, and we can talk
Okay.
next time. And then master plan. At the last meeting, I indicated to the board that we had received a scope of services from MRPC. It did send it out to you. I spoke with the town manager not last week, the week before, towards the end of the week, and Mr. Cole was concerned about moving forward with MRPC and was hoping that the board would do the RFP process. So there has not been a contract signed, and I do have an RFP that I can get to the board probably just after town meeting. It's draft, and it would cover what we've talked about. I had started working on that. I had it probably 70% done, and there was a comment made in a meeting about let's get MRPC in here and start with the master plan. So I stopped with the RFP and towards MRPC and sent them the request, and it took several weeks for them to respond, to which we got what we got. So I guess that's why this is here. I'm looking for, I guess, some direction from the board and in which way you would like to go. Do we want to use MRPC, or do we want to go through the RFP process?
I had concern as well. I was surprised at the last meeting that we had a quote and we're working on or potentially working on a contract with MRPC. I was under the impression we were going to do an RFP. I have no objection to MRPC responding to an RFP, but I certainly would have a problem without going out to bid. I also think the quote for services that we have is certainly not detailed enough. We have spent a lot of time, you had circulated numerous RFPs. I know I've researched RFPs that other communities have done.
Mm-hmm.
And personally, I think we need to take the time to put together an RFP and solicit bids. That's my opinion.
Then I'll have something out to the board sometime in the first week or two of May.
Okay. And that's essentially, I'll just echo what Mrs. Bertram just said. That was my concern, because I know it's been a while. We've talked about the master plan, and I'm clearly a proponent of getting this thing moving in a positive direction. But I also want to make sure that we're very careful about the way we go through the RFP process, because it heavily influences what the output is at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And I have no qualms about using MRPC. It's clearly in their wheelhouse, but I would like to explore other options and get input from other firms. And who knows, maybe there's a firm that we feel would be a better fit for our needs.
Sure. Then I'll apologize for my misinterpretation, and we'll move forward with the RFP draft.
Excellent. Anything else on the master plan component?
Nope. I know there's nothing under director's items, but as I was finishing up my slides for the town meeting articles today, I just wanted to check in with the board. When we went through them the last time, I provided some theoretical calculations for the difference in parking between the existing bylaw and the proposed bylaw. And it was evident that some of the public were fixated on seeing what those look like for the Ritter building. So I did include a slide that outlines the Ritter building. And I just wanted to check in with the board and make sure that there wasn't something that you folks felt was missing from that presentation as far as either substance or theoretical calculation that you would like to see included for Saturday.
And you felt the public was concerned about Ritter or Passios? I felt like
I felt it was probably both. I've spoken with people offline as well who have mentioned Ritter specifically. I can do Passios as well. All the information is available to do a similar calculation.
Okay. I thought those examples you crafted were excellent because it gave the public the ability to look at what we have now versus what the new regulations would be. And it put the spotlight on some of the deficiencies we have and what our approach would be going forward.
Mhm.
My only concern in terms of Passios would be the fact that I feel like there's a lot of things up in the air with the future of that building and the land.
Mhm.
And those topics are going to be part of the discussion. And so,
And that's kind of why I avoided it.
So rather than try to lead people in one direction or the other, I think we just leave that particular property out of the loop unless the other members of the board feel differently. But I know it's going to be a hot topic at town meeting, and so I'm just looking to not complicate things.
Yes, my feeling was Ritter is theoretical and TCP is a little too real.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, that makes sense. But I know the public was asking a lot about Passios and Ritter, but aren't both of those properties under different jurisdiction for parking?
They absolutely are, and I actually did include a little asterisk in my slide with a note that they're not subject to it. And I think part of what people are focusing on by looking at those buildings, some of it may be, well, what happens if the town abandons them? But I think it's also a definite building that someone can look at and conceptualize.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than pick out a commercial entity in town and do the calculation for pre and post and put those folks in the public eye unnecessarily. I think looking at Ritter as here's something everybody knows, as opposed to, oh, we've got a warehouse that's 200,000 square feet. I mean, people are like, okay, what is that? Most people can't conceptualize it. A 200,000 square foot building without saying, oh, well, it's just like this building.
And I think there's an advantage to using town buildings, at least so, especially if we meet them, frankly, but because there's something to be said about holding the town accountable to its own rules, even if it's not a rule that actually applies here. That's different in people's minds.
Sure.
Yeah.
I just had a thought. What if we did the library?
Sure.
And the only reason I mention the library is it's probably the only property that hasn't been part of the discussion in terms of what the future of all these buildings would be.
Mm-hmm.
And I know
like
it's
that.
newer, so it's probably quote unquote more compliant, but
yeah, no, that's a relatively simple one to put together.
And Adam, I especially appreciated when you pointed out the businesses that that many of the businesses with larger parking lots explicitly are going above and beyond what we have required or would require, because they have their own commercial calculations that they do for their,
They say, we know we need this much parking.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Adam, did you have anything else?
Nope, that was it.
All right. Our meeting schedule, 6:30 p.m. Zooming along until further notice. Town meeting, we have a May 1st, 9 a.m. Meeting scheduled, although I don't.
We actually scheduled it for 8:30. So
Okay.
it would be an in-person meeting if we decided to hold it. I don't know that right now there's anything that calls for that.
Okay. And May 11th, public hearing for 711 Mass Ave and
May 10th.
May 10th.
May 10th. I'm sorry. And then our next meeting would be May 24th.
Correct.
Any comments from the public?
There's no public here.
Well, okay.
Oh,
Board comments? Can I do board comments?
Yes, Mrs. Bertram.
I have two things. First is, at one of our last meetings, I mentioned the detention basin between the library and the Brooks House, and if you could investigate the maintenance plan for that. And
okay. And you know what? I haven't gotten the maintenance plan out. I did speak to the DPW director, and he was going to have a look at it. He didn't recall it being an issue. And I did look back at the, as part of the MS4 work, the town is required to do annual BMP inspections. And Comprehensive Environmental Inc., who is our consultant for the stormwater work, did inspect it and did find it to be in good working order. I drove by myself and got out of the car and looked around, and there might be some woody vegetation on the upper portions of it that could be removed. It's mostly small stuff. It appeared that most of what was inside was cattails. And in speaking with the DPW director, he expressed some reservations about doing too much clearing within the basin for fear of disturbing, needing to revegetate and regrade the bottom of it. But I will get the O&M plan out sometime this week and follow up with him.
Yeah, if you could do that, that would be great. I would also check with Conservation Commission about cattails, because according to mosquito control, those are actually considered invasive because they actually breed mosquitoes. So you might want to check with Matt Morrow on that as well. And then secondly, and this is a sensitive subject, but I think it needs to be brought up, we are a 5-member board operating at 4 members. And while I appreciate Mr. Torgensen coming forward and volunteering and being elected as a write-in, he is not attending. And I feel that if he is not going to attend, we need to fill the seat. So I would recommend that we send a certified letter to Mr. Torgensen to determine whether or not he intends to remain on the board. And if not, then we should be able to fill the vacancy.
I will have to verify with town council. If the board wants to vote, I'm happy to send him a certified letter. I believe that the remedy for an elected official would be a recall election. And that is outlined within the charter. If I remember correctly, because you did raise this to me, and I did, but I had gotten back to you. I believe that you need 100 signatures of registered voters submitted by petition to the town clerk to trip that. And I can send the citation out to the board with a link to the charter where it outlines that.
My hope would be if Mr. Torgensen doesn't have the ability to participate because of his own personal circumstances, I would hope that he would resign and
I would agree.
A recall election, because I think that would be better for everyone.
Yes.
That's really my hope. And I know that when you and I talked, you said you've attempted to contact him many times, and that is why I am recommending a certified letter so that we know that he receives it. But my hope would be that he resigns on his own or begins to participate, which would be even better. But if he is unable to participate, then I would hope that he would be willingly resign so that we can get an active member of the board in that place.
What is the process for filling an empty seat? Because this would really align with elections.
Yeah, well, if he were to resign, the board would meet with the select board, and they would seek applicants. And those who came forward would be subject to an interview of sorts between the combined membership of both boards. And then a majority vote would seat a new member of the planning board. That person would sit from their appointment through the next town election. And then that seat would be elected for the remainder of the term. So currently, Mr. Torgerson is on the first year of a 5-year term. So if he were to resign, let's say by August, the boards were able to appoint someone. That person would sit from August through the following May. And then there would be a seat up for election for 5 years, which would be one of Paula Tanner or Matthew. I think it might be you, Paula. And so Paula would be on there would be a seat for 5 years and a seat for 3 years. And if Paula chose to rerun, she would run probably for her 5-year seat. And then the person who was in the seat would have the option to run for the 3-year seat, or anyone else would.
Like when I ran for the 1-year slot. Makes sense.
My concern is there's 4 years remaining on this term, and he is not able to attend for whatever reason. And I'm very concerned about the fact that with a 5-member board, we need 5 members that participate on a regular basis.
I share those concerns, and it becomes very important in the case of special permits. If the other 4 members can't attend, it renders the board useless at that point in terms of approving a special permit. So,
or if someone needs to recuse or otherwise.
Yeah.
I think we need to articulate all of this in a letter and send it to Mr. Torgerson, and then hopefully he will either resign or start participating, and then we can move forward to try to get 5 people in the seats.
Does the board want me to draft a letter and send it to them for review at the next meeting? Do you want me to just draft a letter outlining the issues, send it, and CC the board?
I would personally rather for review.
I would as well. And just to give you my perspective, I would encourage his participation and then say, if you're unable to, please consider resigning, because we depend on people being able to participate at some level in order to conduct business.
Yeah. Agreed. So we can put that on I guess we have to put it on an agenda, correct?
Yeah, well, I'll have it for you for the 10th.
Okay.
Excellent. Any other board comments or concerns? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning? Mrs. Bertram,
Aye.
Mr. Brenner,
Aye.
aye for myself.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
You too. Good night.
Thank you, everybody.